Hey there everyone, this is Josh Justice, aka Coding It Wrong, and now the live stream has a name, Coding It Live, because I found a domain name. Welcome back to folks who have watched in the past. Anybody coming here from React Native EU, where I spoke just a couple days ago, thanks for getting the next step to connect with me here. We're going to be following on from that conference talk on testing to write some tests for an open source application today. We got some other big news that's exciting to me, so I just want to say thank you to my new employer, Test Double. So I'm starting a new job. It's another consultancy. Test Double is a company who improves the world's software. It's kind of a focus they have, do things with excellence. Testing, of course, is one part of that. No surprise that I would be excited about that. So I want to say thank you to Test Double for their support for this live stream, and I'm looking forward to stuff we're going to be able to do together in the future. But for now, we get to do React Native testing as a part of it. I want to show you what we're going to be working on today for just an hour or so. And if you're in the chat, or if you're catching the recording afterwards, please say hello in the chat or in the comments. And let me know you're there. Let me know your thoughts on testing. We're going to be looking at my other open source Expo application called Surely. On a previous live stream series, we worked on a new application, building it out in Expo from scratch, called Firehose. Surely is a to-do list application, and run with Expo and React Native Web. It runs on iOS. Runs on the web. It would run on Android, but I don't have Android, so I don't have the effort to put into that. But yeah, so we've got this React Native application. It works great. I love using it for my personal to-dos. And we've got test coverage. We've got significant tests. If we run through these here, let's get them running. Going through all the major screens of the application. I refer to them as screen tests. And basically each of the React navigation screens that I have, we test it sort of like fully integrated, that whole screen and all the JavaScript and all the components and data layer and everything is tested all together. And so that's really helpful test coverage. When these tests pass, and we got some warnings here because that happens sometimes in React, but when these tests pass, I'm confident that everything is still working, so I can make changes with confidence. But these are kind of broad integration tests in the sense that they integrate all of my JavaScript together. And it can be beneficial to have lower level tests of like smaller components and JavaScript files all together. So we're going to be looking today at how to add component test coverage at a lower level. Let me show you one reason these can be beneficial. So if you run, I have a command here, yarn test coverage. What that does in here is it runs Jest with the coverage flag. And Jest uses a tool called Istanbul to check the coverage of your code. That is, as these tests run, it makes sure for every line and every logical branch of the JavaScript code, is it covered by at least one test. So let's let this run and see how thorough it is. Based on, I'm feeling pretty confident about these tests. Let's see how good they fare based on this one metric of the test coverage. We'll give it a second because I don't know really what to say to stall for time. Yeah, so as we take a look here, we get this output in the console, and it also is there's a nice HTML form you can use as well. And so this says that 81% of statements are covered, 67% of branches, 76% of functions, and 81% of lines. So that's significant coverage, but it's not 100. So let's take a look through. Baseurl.js, the number's a little bit lower. It is 100% of functions though. Breakpoints.js, 0% of branches and 0% of functions are covered. Okay. Even this OAuth login, okay, so we're getting some coverage. So the reason why is, as we're doing these broad integration tests, we go through main paths of the application, and some things we're getting 100% coverage through there. That's pretty nice. But other things we're getting a low level of coverage. And when you're testing in deep integration of many things, it's hard to cover every single branch. So one reason you might want to add lower level tests is to get full branch coverage, or a higher level of branch coverage, or cases where you think it would be useful. There's other benefits as well for the lower level tests, such as being very easier to replicate edge case scenarios and getting better feedback in test failures as far as when something is not going wrong. It can influence the design in a positive way as well. So just as we go through here, basically as an experiment, I'm going to say I want to add a component test for every component we have. Maybe we'll decide as we look at them afterwards, but basically what we'd be saying is, if you wanted to test this component directly, how would you do it? And then after we write it, we'll look and say, okay, how often do we think this is really useful? And how often would we say, oh, you probably don't need to bother? And we're going to be looking in some other decisions about testing, like what to mock out and what to integrate with as well. So with that said, even if some of these tests, it's like, oh, I don't know if that's very useful, we're going to try it and see. That way we can give it a try and make our own assessment as we go. So with that said, we don't really need to go over this code coverage, because even though button group is covered 100% all the way across, there's not a direct component test for it. So we still want to look at it. The other thing is there's some other files here that aren't specifically React Native components, and I do want to test those, but since the title of the stream was React Native component testing, I do want to start with the React Native first, because that can be where some of the biggest challenges are when it comes to unit testing. So let's go through there. Let's just take a look and we'll see how far we get in an hour together today. So most of my components, the way my folder structure is set up here is I have source components and then source screens. That's where most of my React Native code is. So let's just check out components and start at the start. All right, we have download on the App Store button with a image file there, and we have an index folder. So this is a very simple component here. It takes no props. It just gives us a pressable with an image in it. And when you press on the button, it calls linking, opens a URL, it opens the App Store URL. Let's actually see that in action here. Download on the App Store. When we click on it, maybe it's not working. Let's see. Yep, it opens surely on the App Store, which actually pops up the App Store app on the Mac. And I wonder how it's opening a new window. It looks like, I guess that's by default. Apparently here, it does open in a new window by default. So cool. All right, so what would we do, assuming we did want a component test of this, what do we want to test? The way I started saying it over the years as I clarify what to test, testing styles in a jest test is not that useful. Probably some other form of visualizing it would be better. And testing that every single component or every single DOM element is the case in a React Web application, I find is generally not useful as well. Generally, you're kind of just repeating what you've already typed in the production code. What I found is valuable in these jest tests, is fully specifying the behavior. So what's the behavior? What's the functionality of the component? Is it showing some information? Is it calling some other function when some interaction happens? And let's fully specify that in the test. So what's the behavior of this button? Well, the behavior is you have something that you can press, that when you press it, it opens a certain URL, which is to say it calls linking.openURL with a certain URL. So let's specify that in a test. When I have something, I don't know if I want to say index.spec.js or put it at the top level there. I'm thinking I'm going to do, just so it shows up at the right place in my folder hierarchy, I guess I'm going to do index.spec.js here. Let's just get started. Anytime we make a change, our jest tests are going to automatically rerun, but that's okay. All right. So we're going to describe download on the App Store button. And I like to separate out of sort of when a situation from the expected behavior, just because that makes it more readable for me on tests. So say when clicking the button, it opens the App Store website in a browser. And that's maybe not the most precise way to say it, but conceptually that's what's going on. All right, so let's kind of specify this out. We're going to say render. My autocomplete is not working right here. That's interesting. Render download on the App Store button. We're going to import render from testing library React Native and import download on the App Store button from index. We render it, and then we want to fire event.press on an element. Screen get by. So what do we want to get it by? In all my very simple testing functionality, I talk about getting by text, because when you have visible text, that's the best way to do it, because it's what is visible to the user. We want to specify what's visible to the user as much as possible. Here, really, we just have a pressable, a button that has an image on it. And one of the really helpful things about this that this actually brings up is that I haven't made this button fully accessible. There's nothing that my test can use to find and press this button in a good way. And in the same way, a screen reader using the app, it would be hard for someone to be able to see, for the screen reader to read out to them the contents of this button. So I think we're going to be better off if we if we make this component more accessible as a part of this. As a part of this test. Now I'm not actually sure which of the accessibility props to use here, so let's just look this up. React Native Testing Library. Let's reorient ourselves with the queries to use. Yeah, by text, by placeholder text, by display value, text input. Okay, that's not right. Test ID by label text. Returns a React test instance with a matching accessibility label prop. And I'm pretty sure that that tends to be what's read out well for a screen reader. So let's say that, get by label text. And what should the accessibility label read out to the user be shown here? You know, it would be great sometime if I do a stream using VoiceOver on iOS, or even voice command or voice control, which I used, so you can help you visualize that. But for now, what text do we want this to say? It would be great if it said download on the App Store. Cool. So we're going to get an element with that accessibility label, press it, and then we're going to confirm something. One interesting note, because I'm having to make changes here, it's actually turning into a bit of test-driven development. This will actually fail at first because there's no element with this label text, but we'll be able to fix that to make this test pass. And this is another advantage of testing at a lower level rather than a broader level. There's not a lot of functionality to this button. I'm not really afraid that it's broken, but I am afraid that the button's not accessible. And so just by deciding to write a component test, we've gotten an accessibility benefit from that. So what do we want to confirm? Oftentimes I want to write this out in the way that I want to write the test, and then I'll figure out how to make the mocks work to make it happen. I would love to kind of be able to say, expect linking.openURL to have been called with an App Store URL. In this case, I could import the constants, or I could just put it in directly. Importing the constants in the test feels pretty safe, actually. So let's just do that. I wouldn't always do that, but I mean, if the App Store URL changes, I'm going to break it somewhere. So I don't get any more clarity by typing in the App Store URL here. That's the URL that we're linking to. All right, so actually ESLint is telling us that linking is not defined, but let's go ahead and save it and get the test to tell us the problem as well. Looks like it's trying to rerun a lot of the tests, which is sort of unfortunate. I think for a performance standpoint, it would be good to say, just limit my test to download. So now we're just going to run the download on the App Store button, one at a time. Okay, first error, unable to find element with accessibility label download on the App Store. So let's just add that. I think, I guess we could add it on the image, but we might as well add it on the pressable. Accessibility label equals download on the App Store. Something that as someone who doesn't use a screenwriter regularly, I didn't think about that while making this app, so I'm glad the test has pushed me towards that. I'm going to save and see if we get past our current error before we move on. Great, now we get a reference error, linking is not defined. So now I need to make linking available and sort of set up the mocking. I think just a simple Jest module mock will work here, so let's see. I'm going to import linking. Yeah, I don't want to mock all of the React Native module. Oh, you know, but React Native might be mocked by default in the tests. Let's find out. There's a lot of ways to do mocking and stuff in React Native because of how it handles separating out native stuff for default. So let's just see what happens. Don't want to do unnecessary work. It passes. Great. Now, I want to see it fail to make sure I've done this right. So let me put in a bad value here and save and make sure it fails. I want to make sure that we're not getting a false positive, but the test will really fail if something is not called with the wrong value. Yeah, here we go. Expected bad value, but received that URL. So if we put it back, we're good to go. So there is something here. It's more than just a button, trivial button. Like there is some functionality happen. And so now we have that covered, which is maybe nice. Maybe nice to be determined. Again, I'm not saying you must write tests like this. I'm saying if you wanted to test this component, here's how you could do it. And that's really the only branch. That's the only functionality there. I suppose you could check that the right image is shown, but I think confirming that visually is going to be better than anything else. So I think we're probably good to go when it comes to testing this component. I'm not going to bother checking these in unless I feel some uncertainty later. I'll kind of check them in bulk at the end. All right, what's next? Button group. Let me remind myself what button group does. What is ESLint saying here? This is my module, and TypeScript is saying that it doesn't know what it is. Maybe someday I'll get on board with TypeScript. All right, so what does a button group do? It's just a view that renders out its children. So all it really adds is this button container styles, which I use my style queries library to get some responsive design. And so what I say here is the buttons are displayed with a flex direction of column, up and down. But if the screen width is a minimum width, they go to row instead. And I'll show you what happens there, what that's for. That is for these buttons. So check it out. If I go over to here, if I make the screen very narrow, the buttons are stacked in columns. But if the screen gets wider, they lay out into a row instead, and they align to the right. So that's what that component is for. I've put that one layout concern in one file, so I don't need to repeat it at multiple points throughout the application. So what is the functionality here? Well, there's that responsive design functionality, and actually the conditionals are hid behind this React Native Style Queries stuff here. So there's not multiple branches in this file directly. But that is those visuals are something that is hard to test. And in fact, in my tests, I don't know if I have good test coverage of React Native Style Queries, but I could test that there. Hey, does screen width min correctly return the right styles and munge them together based on the width of the screen that we're currently on? So within this component, there's not branches. There's just the one path. So really functionally, all that's really happening is making sure that it renders out its children. So if we wanted to test this file, we could test that it renders its children. So let's see what we think about doing that. Honestly, this is one of the things that I'd probably be least likely to actually write a test for, but let's just see what it looks like. I used to have some autocomplete here. It seems like it's not working anymore. Button group. And what is the behavior? Is it renders its children. That's all there really is to test here. Sorry, my autocomplete is not working, that I have to type that out manually. Import all right, so render button group, and let's put some children in here. Let's say text hello RNTL, React Native Testing Library. Let me say expect screen get by text hello RNTL to be truthy. I still never quite know if I should do get or queried here. It doesn't actually make any difference, but it's a stylistic thing. So let's make sure behaviorally that the children are rendered out. I think this is a false. Yeah, that's fine. That passes. Let's make sure that we don't get a false positive. Let's make sure that it actually fails by breaking it. I think actually, since we're not going to be actually looking at the app, I'm going to quit the iPhone because we're not going to change the functionality. I suppose if I was changing some of those accessibility labels, it would be good to test it, but let me just close the app out. Oh, so that's surprising. Oh, yeah, see, so here's another thing I caught by making sure I got it read. My tests were focused down on the wrong test. So let's change them to say button group. I didn't even think about that as something that you can catch by checking for a red in your tests. I'm checking that you're even running the right test. All right, now when I intentionally broke this component, the test is failing because it's not finding those children. So let's put the children back and save. Make sure we get a green. We do, great. All right, that very trivial test is done because there's very little behavior in that component. So let's see what else. Center column, again, is a reusable thing where I'm just applying some styles to get a column in the center and then rendering out the children. I will, depending on what I decide for my personal style, I might or might not write a test for this, but I'm not going to do that on the stream because it's more of the same. What about date picker modal? So date picker modal is well, now I regret it, and I want to pull up the app to show the date picker. But there's a third-party React Native paper dates library. It's really excellent. I love it. It is just such a great date picker. And I've made my date picker modal. That's funny that I gave it a different name than the file name there. To basically handle my own props. I always want the locale of English. I always want mode of single. I have what's going on here? Oh yeah, handle confirm. So I want my own on confirm function here that is automatically. What is going on? Give me a second to process this. Handle confirm with the date of day end. If a date is given. Okay, so if a date is chosen, because you might not have chosen the date in there, we go and get the start of the day, and that's because, yeah, I'm not really sure why it's giving me dates in with the given times, but I'm using date function start of day to get 12 o'clock a.m. For a date, because that's just how I store it on the back end, because I don't use times, I only use dates. So just a tiny bit of logic there, and some default props that are passed in. So what to test here? Like this is branching logic. It would be good to check this branching and to specify this. But I have this third-party modal. And I think what is happening here, it depends on whether that modal has native functionality or not as to what I'm going to be able to do here. So this is a good challenging one. So let me immediately open the simulator back up again. Let's pull it up because I want you to be able to visualize it, and I'm going to want to visualize it to be able to tell what I'm testing here. So while the simulator is booting, I'm going to create a file. Sometimes folks can say things like, aren't you just testing that other component? Aren't you just testing somebody else's code that should already be tested? But there is more than that. I'm testing the functionality that I've added in. Yeah, this is running a little slow. All right, now let me just bring in those imports here. Import date picker modal from date picker modal. All right, describe date picker modal. What do we want to do here? So I could test that once we choose this component, that it passes the right props on to this date picker modal. I don't think I want to do that. That doesn't seem useful. We are getting this branch covered, and so the stats show that it's fine. So I'm going to make a judgment call that in this case, it doesn't matter that I'm passing on these trivial things. I trust myself to do that right. But it's the on confirm that's different. It's the on confirm where I'm adding some extra logic. So let's see here. So when it's confirming, yeah, so let's say describe when confirming with no date. It calls on confirm with null. All right, so let's open up the app again. I'm going to start getting this rendered so we can see. So yeah, depending on whether this is all in JavaScript, we may be able to actually run the real modal in the test, or we might not be able to. So let's show the date picker. So in here, when I choose edit and I choose a date for defer until, I get this nice modal up. Let me drag it here so you can see the whole thing. We get select date, we see a little month picker here, and we can choose the year. We can edit to type it in if we like. We get a choose button. So that's that awesome React Native paper dates. If you're using React Native Paper, I really recommend this library for your date picking needs. It's really awesome. So okay, so yeah, so what I'm visualizing, what I want to do, basically what I want to say is if I pop this up and it doesn't already have a date, actually that doesn't even matter because, well, yeah, if we start out with no date, if that's null, and then we tap confirm, this should get called with no date, and then we just confirm that we pass it along. So let's just try it. Let's try interacting with this directly. So choose is the name of that label, and I remember that this should have, well, that's text, so I should be able to find that. So what I want to be able to say is a fire event press screen get by text choose. I don't know if that's styling. Let's say choose. I'll say needs all caps. So maybe that needs to be all caps. We'll see. So fire event. So we want to click choose, and then I want to say maybe I need some other things, but in general, what I want to happen is I want an onConfirm passed in. I say I expect onConfirm to have been called with null, and I want onConfirm to be a jest function and mock function. We'll give it a name. That just makes it a bit more readable. All right. I don't know if this will pass or not, but this is the basics of what I want to test here, and we'll just see what we need to do to make it pass in terms of test setup. Once again, I see that I'm rendering my children here. I'm calling the wrong thing, so let's say date picker. Just run the test we're focusing on here. I'm able to find an element with text choose. So let's try choose. And able to find an element with text choose. So I have a theory. I have a theory that this has something to do with some sort of context for modals to show up, because those are like rendered in a different way or something like that. So let's see if there's any other warning. Let's go down that path a little bit to try to see if we can get that to show up correctly. I'm going to look up the docs for React Native paper dates and see if they say anything. Maybe they even say something about testing, which is sometimes the case. All right, dependencies are React Native paper. RMap tips and tricks. All right, I don't see anything in there. So let's try React Native paper. Go to the docs. Just remembering the getting started. Wrapping things, paper provider. So let's try that. If we put this into our test, it's a bit unfortunate because this is concerns not really directly related to our test that we're thinking we may need to put in here, and we're kind of having to speculate to see if we can get this working. So that kind of some things that ideally we would prefer not to have to deal with in our tests, but let's go down this path and see. So my guess is that maybe the modal will actually show up and be rendered in the test because of this provider being in place. Able to find an element with text choose. Let's try screen.debug, which is going to output the full output of what's being rendered. That'll help us to see if the picker modal is there. No, we are. Yeah, look at this. Text input, MDYs. This looks like a lot of stuff is being rendered out, so I think that's actually that's a really good sign. So I wonder why choose isn't showing up. I don't know how to search my terminal output because I'm a GUI developer. Let's see if I can even do choose. Huh. That's interesting because choose. Oh, you know what? I think choose might be passed in as a prop, and so, well, this is my date picker modal. I don't know. Let's see if we can find out. Box none. I actually just randomly, I believe that that's the X button there. Well, no, that's pointer events box none. Okay, so here's a modal. Yeah, so much stuff being outputted here. It's hard to browse through to find it. Function on click, hit slop close button. Okay, well, it's not the close button. Disabled true. Could it be this? Accessory role header. Style text. Save. Save. Why is it save? Because here it's choose. Because I haven't worked in this in a while, I may be forgetting something that I have configured that with somewhere. Text choose, handle choose, detail form, save label. Save label is configurable in here. Yeah, so because at a few different parts in the app, I pass in different save labels. All right, so let's pass in a save label here. And it looks like there's not even a default. So we'll say save label equals, say choose, because that's one of the examples we use here. Get by text choose. All right. Now I'll try to go back. We want to keep this test as simple as possible. So if we get this working, even in terms of finding the choose, we can see if we don't need the paper provider anymore. A debug comes out. Oh, that's cluttering things up. So let's try again without that. It says that onConfirm is called. Let's put a bad value in there and see if it errors out. And then once we're under green, we can go back and try to remove things that may not be necessary. Yep, it is correctly calling the arguments. Actually, I kind of even, let me save again. I want to break it on the other side as well to make sure. Break it in the production code to say, if I've got our production code wrong and we're calling onConfirm with bad value, do our tests fail? Yep, they do. So let's put this back. Now I'm thinking that probably we didn't need that paper provider. That was not the thing that actually fixed things. So let me just try to remove that from there, save, and see if the test still passes. It does. That's really great. All right, so we no longer need that provider. We've got a nice simple focus test for that branch of date picker modal. So now the next branch is, okay, if we do have a date, which is called day end into here, then this gets called instead. So when you're thinking about testing, when you're looking and testing something after the fact, you could be tempted to say, how do I test this line of code? How do I call this function to test this line of code? But instead of thinking, how do I test this line, this is another place where the idea of behavior is helpful. You could say, what behavior of the component from the outside is this covering? What inputs do I need to give the correct outputs that go through this pathway? Because if it's doing anything, if this code is doing anything, it's handling a scenario where when certain inputs are sent in, different outputs are sent out. So let's try to simulate that scenario. We say, describe when saving with confirming with a date selected, it calls onConfirm with the, and so the deal is, calls onConfirm with the start of that day. Start of that day. So that's the logic. That's the non-trivial, a little bit more than non-trivial thing that's happening. All right, so let's set this up. Put in the onConfirm and render it out. And calling choose. So what do we need to do to get a date passed to here? Well, a date is passed to here when it's selected in the modal. So what we need to do is interact with the modal to get it selected. We need to press something. 99% of the time, you need to press something. And we need to press a date in here. So one of the reasons I haven't done a lot of automated testing of the date modal in this app was dates are just fuzzy, and in your app it's like, oh well, what date are you running the test on? Things might be different, and you're in a different month and different days are available, and so you can try to mock out the date, but it can be hard to do that, or you can design your code so you can do that, which is nice. In this case, I had a brainstorm thinking about this 2 days ago. I was like, oh well, if I just choose, I'm not testing all the details of this modal, I just need a date on here. And so if I just choose a day that's available in every month, then we're fine. So anything from 1 to 28. I think I might choose 2 just because if I chose 1, maybe it's defaulting to that. So choosing the 2, that could be good. So what I'd like to be able to say is screen get by text 2. I don't know if that'll work or not, but I'd love to be able to say I clicked on 2, and then I want confirm to have been called with something. Let me just say something. I know this will fail, but this will at least give me test output to confirm if a date is coming through. Then I can think about how to make an assertion that's satisfactory for my purposes. And hopefully it's something that if we took out this line with a start of day, that it would actually fail. That would be great because we confirm that that happens. Unable to find an element with text 2. So that's unfortunate. Is it text? I mean, it looks like it would be text. So let's see what we can do here. I mean, it is tough when you're using those third-party components. There's so much output. But let's just try screen.debug again. And it would be nice if this was a bit bigger instead of just a tiny spot on the screen here. But let's see what we can find out. I know 6. Let me just scroll up and maybe I can find a bunch of those elements. 1829, 1828. What in the world? What is 1827? 1826. Is this years? It's like, I don't know what this is, right? 1800. Screen debug one of the times. Screen size matters a lot. Mr. Khan says in the chat. Hey again, Mr. Khan. I'm pretty sure you've been on another stream in the past, so glad you're here. Huh, so that's weird. I don't want to just... Oh, look at this. These are all listed out, and it's kind of stopped here. I think this is something where tons and tons of output is outputted here, including all these years in the future. Yeah, check it out. It's this. Mr. Khan says, stoked to be here. Thank you for that. It's real encouraging. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad to be working on this stuff together. So yeah, there's this whole long thing. So this is something interesting to think about now, right? So now in the date picker modal, these implementation details are being exposed here, and it's kind of challenging. It's making it hard. We're having to wade through all this JSX to get the test working. And maybe if it changed in the future, maybe it would become fragile. So maybe that's not very helpful. I wonder if I can click on the edit button to get to the type in mode. That might be an easier way to do it, and we can actually type in any arbitrary month, day, and year, regardless of the month that we're in. Let's try that real quick. I'm going to try to get by text edit. I don't know if that's what that is. And then let's try fire event change text. And I don't know, screen.get by placeholder text, and then do the y. And we're going to fill it in with 02, 03, 2022. Sure. I don't think this is a case where this will error out if it's in the past or the future, so that should be fine. And actually, it's already in the past, so that should be nice. All right, so if we fill that in and then we press choose, hopefully onConfirm will be called with some date. Don't know if this will work. Mocking is an option as well. We could mock out date picker modal, but since we got this one working without mocking, it would be nice to get this one working. And again, I say again when I'm not repeating something. At our point, we don't really care at this point if we're testing the kind of month calendar layout picker or the text fill in there. We just need something that's going to appropriately exercise the case where onConfirm is being called back. So we got a red here. Let's see what happened. Enable to find an element with text edit. Oh, right. It's not text, but it might be accessibility label. Get by label text. Let's try that. I am very guessy here. One of the reasons that I have a guess for the label text here is because I was using the app in voice command or voice control. I forget. I was having some wrist pain, and so I was using my voice to interact with the app. And that was a cool learning experience for me. We turn off screen debug again. Get by role is preferred for accessibility, right? Asked Mr. Khan. I am not sure. I know these libraries have opinions. I know that I haven't always fully thought through them, but I don't always share the same opinions on accessibility. But yeah, let me... Mr. Khan, why don't you share your thoughts in the chat if you have them on what it means to get by role is preferred for accessibility and kind of what that means. And maybe once I get through the test or if I get stuck, I can dig into there on the RTL docs to see. And I will at least learn more about it offline. So thank you for your help on this. I'm able to find an element with accessibility label edit. So do I want to try screen debug? One of the things is I'm not really sure what the role that button would have. Like, is edit button an accessibility role? That may be more specific than what accessibility role can provide. I'm not sure. But this is going to be too long, right? Well, no, here's the start. All right. Again, this is not the most productive thing, so I'm probably going to give up very soon. Ooh, this could, well, that's text. Slemix Directa asks what I think about Dart and Flutter. I don't have a lot of direct experience with them. Seems like they're really good technologies with some interesting trade-offs from React Native. Because I'm in the JavaScript and React world, React Native is really beneficial for me to be able to reach for. And that's probably all that I can say on the trade-offs off the top of my head. Flutter is a good technology. I definitely recommend for folks to look into it. As far as I've heard, I myself have not looked into it much. There's the choose. So down below that should be there's select date. There's that. Let's see if we can quickly get to an edit button that we can recognize. That could be what that text is. No, that's the date drop downs. Okay, no, so we're past that. I'm going to look now at the accessibility labels. Type in date. Oh, I think that's what it is. Type in date. You know, visually it's an edit, but it's saying like, oh, I want to type in the date instead. So I'm pretty sure. So let's continue the guesswork. My screen name is coding it wrong, and as I often say, you can decide after this if you think I'm coding it wrong. All right, failed, that's fine. As long if we've made progress, we're still in a good place. So let's see what happens here. Unable to find an element with placeholder mmddyyyyy. So we actually got past the get by label text type in date. So that looks like that would be mmddyyyyy. So let's check again in the output. There might even be a way to serialize screen.debug out to a file. Then you could use a text editor to really go through it in depth. That could be helpful in some cases. You know, so this is another interesting thing. Going through React, so check it out. I think that this case, this might actually be React Native Paper implements this with text up there, text input there. They don't actually have a placeholder listed. So how do we target that? You can use test ID, that. I can look it up by value for what the current date is. So now the next challenge is integrating with this third-party component. How do we look up this field that's down underneath there? I feel like in my text fields, I think I use get by placeholder text because I fill in text fields. Well, I guess not. So let's find, I mean, there's got to be, in one of my screen tests, I've got to be filling in a text field. So let's find out how I do it. To-do list available. When they're available to-dos. Adding. Okay. Screen get by label text, new to-do name. All right, so in that case, I actually have that label text. Do I have an accessibility label here? So in my field, I'm able to add a label text, new to-do name. Here, I'm not. So sometimes you want to go with something even if it's not ideal, but it might make it work. We have a test ID text input flat. That's not great, and I know Mr. Khan's going to say that looking up an element by test ID is definitely not recommended as ideal. But let's at least see if we can get it passing, because I'm on a live stream here, and I'm getting a little embarrassed. Not really. Sort of really. I'm good with it. Y'all are my friends. I want to, even if I knew I was not going to commit this, let me try and see if this passes, so we can at least move the test forward. We can always refactor it by going with a different selector and something we prefer better. Mr. Khan agrees. Thank you. All right, I want to read what you had to say there. Since accessibility labels are actually user-facing, they provide more fidelity as a selector. Test IDs are at the bottom of their list. Okay, that's what I was just... You typed that before I said it, because it's a hidden thing. Find by text is not as preferred as using find by role, but still by test ID. Gotcha. Cool. Mr. Khan, I'm curious, so do you have a sense for this edit button here, if there is an accessibility role we could look it up by? And I'd be happy to look into the screen debug with you here to see. If not now, I will look into it on the side, because I've been challenged to do so, and I'm happy to do so. Oh, we got the weird casing thing where I think it's get by test ID lowercase. Test ID could be easily shared with detox. Yep, that was one of the reasons that I ended up in test IDs at times. Oh, great, cool, great. Check it out. So we've gotten past here to the point where we're confirming that onConfirm has been called, and it's being called with this date. And so this is interesting. Now we get into time zones, which are very exciting. So we are getting the date 2/03/2022, and we're getting a 5 o'clock, 5 a.m. So why is 5 a.m. being called? Because we have start of day right here. I happen to know that I'm in the time zone 5 hours off of Greenwich Median, however that's said, Greenwich Median Time. So it's because of the time zone that that's being called there. So putting that into my test could be risky. That could cause breakage on CI. But let me at least drop it in here for now. And I'm going to add it to do this time zone thing might fail on CI. And that I'm probably going to put off and not do on the stream, because I would love to not deal with time zones on the stream. I'll flail through that on my own, maybe get my act together before I present it to y'all. Okay, all right, so check it out here. I expected a string, but I received that. So that's actually a date object instead. What is going to be the easiest way to instantiate that? I think it's, let's try this. Another thing I don't remember for sure is what strings I can pass in. Someone on the stream might know about that, but if this is the matching date, and we'll check it to make sure it fails with the wrong date, that is good enough, because the formatting is not what we care about here. And actually, these zeros are not needed. Legacy octoliteral. Okay, it didn't actually like that 0 in front of that number. So many interesting low-level details we're getting into here. Comment out the screen debug. I'm reading what Mr. Khan said. Do you believe it can be read as a voiceover? Then it should have a role by which we could select. Yeah. Yep. Expected 10. So now, okay, so check this out. It's saying I expected 10, but I expected 5 here. So that time zone is changing again. This could be an interesting benefit, though, that in the test that I write, I can say 0. Maybe that gets converted to my time zone and compares against the internal time zone. That's another fragility. See if this is fragile because of time zone conversions happening. We're just mounting up tech debt here, but it's documented tech debt, and Mr. Khan feels good about that to do, so I appreciate that. Expected and received, are those the same? Oh, 0303. That's interesting. Why would that be? I know in JavaScript there's the different indexing with the numbers of dates, but is that direction correct? So we chose in the user interface, we typed in February 2. I actually feel like that would probably be 1 instead. Let's check the docs. If y'all haven't seen DevDocs, it's a nice way to get documentation for a lot of languages and frameworks in one place. Ooh, hey, date functions is included. That's exciting. That actually could be extremely strategic. Let's add that in. Datefns is a great library. Good timing. All right, JavaScript, date, new. JavaScript date, new date. Year, month, index. So it's the month index. So why wouldn't that be 1? This is already getting to the point that this seems not very readable. So a way we can mock stub the time not to have to rely on the actual clock. That is a really helpful thing. There are ways to do that. It can be challenging. I'm thinking here, because I can just type in a number and see the number coming out the other side, that it could work okay. And that stubbing the time would also help with the time zones, which would be really positive. Let me see if I can get a really easy time conversion, and I think date functions might even have datefns parse. I remember using this in tests before. This is complicated. This seems like this is not ideal. Date. Y'all, what is going on here? Import parse from date. That's how you see this is not prepared in advance. I would love to parse this. I would love to parse it. Okay, let's look at the pattern. We got to look up the pattern again. Is it capital M or lowercase m? Okay, it's mm/dd. Again, this is not something that is the main thing we want to focus on the test. It's just the day of the month, and then its year is calendar year, y. And then what is the deal? We got to pass in a new date so it knows what's going on. Let's just see. Let's just see. A lot of things that could maybe be improved in this test. Oh, but okay, we got a green. Again, I justify my struggles by saying we're getting to green and then we can refactor later, even off of the stream. Or maybe I won't. We'll see. So we're getting a green. Don't trust it. Don't get excited. We need to see it fail. So what I think is happening here is we're saying we're typing in the date 2/3/2022, and then we're confirming that it's called with 2/3/2022. Oh, you know what? I just realized something that I want to add in here. I'm not yet specifying here that we're calling it with the start of that day. So I want to make it explicit in the test that I'm saying 00.00.00. I want to make that explicit. So let's say hour. So I'm not saying this is the best way to do a time-based test. I'm just trying to get through the day, you know what I'm saying? And here at this point, I'm actually not positive why we're getting the start of the day. Because, you know, we're just choosing a date or typing it in. You'd think that time is not involved already. So if I was writing this test somewhere else, I might actually go through and see what is it really needed? Like, what if I just didn't call start of day? I think it might be something where it chooses the current day and time. So I'm not actually sure why I have this functionality, but I do want to test it. Okay, so received here, but I was expecting a date of NAN. So I've done something wrong with the parsing here. So let's see what hour 1 to 12. Probably do actually need upper. Oh, you know what? It's 24 hour 0 to 23 because the 1 did not accept that. I might do it. Mr. Khan is my cheerleader here. I really appreciate it. It's good to have that for coworkers and pairing as well. Okay, so this does pass. Let's see it fail now. I want to make sure, what if I just commented this out loud? What if we always call unconfirm with null? I want to make sure this test fails to make sure it's really catching what's going on. It does fail. Now let's see what happens if we don't call start of day. And we just, well, actually we could still call that, but we just pass in the day end. We pass it in unchanged. I don't know. I'm hoping that this will get caught. It might not, in which case we might need to do more sophisticated testing to really intercept that. Yeah, it doesn't get caught. So yeah, so this is something probably I needed to investigate more what's happening here. So what I'm going to do in this case is end the stream because we're just about at the end of an hour, and I'm going to add a to-do for myself. What I'm going to say is, I am tentatively saying we're confirming that it's at the start of the day, and that's here. It still might fail on CI. That's definitely a possibility. But I'm going to say here, to do, find out why start of day logic is used. Can we input hours? If can't find a reason, remove that branch. So yeah, adding test coverage and changing or simplifying the logic might be things you have to do separately. So I think at this point, based on the interface, that what's publicly available through this component, I don't see a way to make sure that this line is executed, which is to say, to make sure that that line is included and not omitted. But we've still made some improvement in terms of making sure that we can input a date and then it makes it through out to the other side. We could improve the test ID to be something else. But at a low-level unit test, maybe this is good enough. If there is a role we can use to get type in date, that might work, or even by the text up there. But maybe there's not an accessibility role that's specific enough for this, and so maybe this is good here as well. Mr. Khan says, can we test that onConfirm is called and have a supplemental unit test to verify the 000 functionality? One of the things I could think of there, and Mr. Khan, add more detail if I'm taking this a different direction. If this function was pulled out into a standalone function, when it's a nested function here, it's hard to get to. But if it was a separate function here that was exported by name just for the sake of directly testing it, you could test it there. So that's actually a great point. In that case, though, if I can't find a way to use this functionality through the public interface, maybe it's not even needed. And so maybe we don't want to expose it as a unit to test it. Maybe we want to just say, oh, we've identified that there's complexity in the code that's not needed. And if there is a way through interacting with the date picker modal to trigger the need for that, then that would be great for realism. And just confirming, like, yeah, this is what the user would do that would require this to be there. At the same time, it might just be too cumbersome. Maybe due to just the challenges of React Native or the challenges of this third-party component, it will be hard to trigger that there. In which case, you'd kind of separate it out. Like, hey, I know and I've confirmed that I need this for reality. I can't really test it that directly realistically, but I can set up the function so I could test it directly. Another way you could get access to the handle confirm function is if you mock out the date picker modal, you could get access to it as it was passed in there. And that could be, depending on things, that could be a more realistic way to get to it, but kind of indirect as well. Cool. All right. Mr. Khan is encouraging. Thank you for these great questions that are getting me talking. This is good. So let's wrap up the stream because I want to make this an hour-long stream in general. Today, for once, I've not run over. We'll see if I can make it and land the plane in 4 minutes. So we have a test. Pretty messy with to-dos, but let's see what is there. We are calling the date picker modal with an onConfirm. Here, instead of leaving the date blank like we're doing up here, we are filling in a date, and we're making sure that that's passed on through to onConfirm and that it is the start of the day, at least. Even though I'm not sure, again, this still passed even when I removed this line, but this at least documents for me, hey, here's what I want to confirm. I want to confirm that it's 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. And I've got to-dos for myself to find out things in more detail. Another thing, to step back to a big picture, remember what the goal of what we're doing here is. I'm wanting to add more test coverage for these components just to increase my assurance of things. And when you're doing a test after, it's like, oh, like you got to make judgment calls and see how much of the tests you can add in. Here, like, what is more valuable at this point? To go more into detail on this date picker modal to make sure that I've covered the presence of this start of day? Or is it more valuable to go broad and add some test coverage for these other components, even branches that aren't covered at all through my screen tests? I think it could be valuable to go broad, especially with to-dos in here to remind me to come back. Maybe that's just my excuse because we've been on this for a while, or it's the end of the stream, but I think this is good progress. This is progress to be encouraged about. And when you're thinking about testing, it's really important not to have an all or nothing mentality in terms of being discouraged unless you can test every single little thing and get your test perfect. This came up in the Discord that I have that I encourage folks to join into on React and React Native and JavaScript testing. Someone was talking about challenges with their testing, and one of the things I said in response is I really encourage them, every little bit helps. If you're just getting started in testing, or just getting started in React Native testing, or just getting started testing an old challenging code base, even just getting a little bit covered by tests is something to be encouraged about. And so you should encourage yourself, pat yourself on the back, encourage your coworkers when they get it in, because that's better than no tests, and it's a foothold that lets you go as you increase in your testing knowledge. So that's our progress for today. I'll think it over. Maybe we'll continue on with other components next time. Maybe I'll look ahead for some different types of components to test. But I'll be sure to post it out on social media and on my Discord to let you know what's coming next week. But we are on next week. We're going to shoot for weekly for the stream. Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, hour-long streams. With a React Native specific focus, we're going to be living in this app for a while. There's some other things not directly related to component testing we may diverge on, but we're going to be here. And so this is your place to go if you'd like to join in and talk about React Native testing together. So I want to say thanks so much for everybody that joined. Mr. Khan and Slemix Direct asking about Flutter in the chat. Thank you for that. And anybody else joining in the comments on the recording later, I really appreciate it. I want to send you where you can go next. Codingitwrong.com is my website. It's where you can get in touch. You can, if you're on Twitch here, you're on Twitch here, but otherwise, if you're on YouTube, you can find my Twitch channel there. You can find the YouTube channel. I've got a blog that I post on various kinds of social media, including the Discord group, which is maybe not social media, but would love to have you there and chatting about testing. I'd love to, I'm in there every day, much of the time. Would love to chat with you about any testing or test-driven development questions or ideas you have. A lot of the ideas folks have shared there have given me ideas for different kinds of content I can create in the future. So thanks so much for joining in, and we will see you next week. See ya.